Good evening and welcome to this Thursday's Torpedo Live. It is February 16th, 8 p.m. and excited to do Torpedo Live this evening. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Mark Kulak. I run King's Landing Sport Fishing Charters out of Toronto, Ontario, and also run projectsalmon.ca. Going to wait a few moments while we have folks join us tonight, but look forward to doing a show tonight called Using Divers for Salmon and Trout. So as we're waiting for folks to join, I see we got about 4 people so far, and I'm sure those numbers will climb. Feel free to plug any questions you have about running divers in the comments section, and I'll be glad to answer those questions as we go along. Tonight, I am going to be doing the session solo. Many of you know there is actually the Greater Niagara Fishing and Outdoor Show on right now. I was meant to be doing this with Lucas, but Lucas is actually at the show and can't do this. So I'm going to do this solo today. And then I'm heading out tomorrow actually to the show for Friday and Saturday. But feel free, ask any questions you have, plug a comment here. Let me know that you can hear me okay. And don't forget to like and share this video. Helps us get our viewers up, and that's fantastic. Also, make sure you're listening. Like every week, we will have a question of the day for some torpedo prizes. I got the question; it's up here right now, and I'll be covering the answer shortly. So we've got about 20 odd people here, so it's probably good to get started. I see a few people commenting, so that's fantastic. It means that you can probably hear me, but feel free and let me know if you can't hear, and we'll go from there. As I said today, mainly we're going to be talking about divers, and I'm gonna go kind of from A to Z. I think on divers, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I use divers. The one thing I always say when we do these videos, this is how I fish. It doesn't mean it's the only way to fish. So please don't take it the wrong way if I'm disagreeing with how you do it. It's how I've personally found I am successful. So for those of you that don't know me, as I mentioned, my name is Mark. I am owner-operator of King's Landing Sport Fishing out of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I also am the owner-operator of Project Salmon, which is I call it a custom salmon tackle line, flashers, divers, bait heads, those types of things. Located again out of Toronto, Ontario, but we ship all over North America. Anyways, with that, let's talk divers. And I've already seen a question come up asking about slide divers, and I will cover those momentarily. But let's talk about the different divers first. And if you can see my desk here, I literally dumped out one of my slider boxes. Sorry, not one of my diver boxes. So let's talk about the different divers. First, I got little divers here. So I've actually got a couple of little these are mini slide divers, but these are mini divers. I got one that's a little bit bigger. This is a dipsy diver, a little bit bigger, but smaller than a standard diver. So I'd say those are the first divers, really, really small divers. I've also got a rod here rigged with a small slide diver, and I'll get into that in a little bit more later. But I think the first question everyone's gonna ask, so Mark, when do you use a small diver versus call it a standard diver like this? So for me, I'd say it's a couple of things. First of all, in the spring, I run a lot of the small divers, especially if I'm fishing for browns, fishing for salmon and trout in the skinny water. So if I'm fishing water that's anywhere from 20 feet to 50 feet, absolutely running small diver. A couple of reasons for that. I have this view that that time of year, especially if you're fishing with browns, a little bit spookier. Smaller diver gets them away from the boat because you have to let more line out. So that's when I will often use a smaller diver. So that's kind of where I start out at the beginning of the season. A lot of my small divers. As we kind of work our way through, that's when we start to get into the standard divers. And a standard diver, it's something I've got a few here. Actually, here I've got a standard. This is actually an old. I call it old, but they don't make them anymore. This is an old torpedo diver. One of the old torpedo standard divers. Great divers. I've got a clear slide diver here. Gain standard size. Comparable weights, so on and so forth. You know, I also get into, here's a standard, actually this one's rigged up here as I make a mess, but here's a standard diver. This is a Walker Downriggers deeper diver. This is an old diver, but again, standard diver. You know, this one's orange. It's one of my coho rigs right here. And then, you know, then I've got, you know, these are a couple of my divers, my Project Salmon divers, but here's a couple of standard divers again. You know, these are some of my customs, green and black dots, and black RV. So these are your standard divers. And what I mean by a standard diver, they've and you can see here, they've got the standard weight on them. So they've got the standard weight that you can adjust to either go right or left, or if you have it in the center, go straight down. And for those of you that, you know, that have maybe just started using divers, you probably have been using standard divers, like something like this one right here. You know, this is a Kelly Green. You know, I'm going to snap the ring back on this for a second. That is a typical standard diver right here. You know, you take the weight, you can spin it, you know, to the right, to the left. Always good to have a screwdriver handy, and you can basically set that up so it planes either to the right or to the left. That's a standard diver. Great diver. I would say for me, if I'm running only 2 divers, chances are most of the season I'm going to have a standard diver out. Typically, I find these standard divers, they're good from, call it 20 feet down. But, you know, my opinion is they start to plateau around 65, 70 feet depth. Regardless of how much line you start letting out, you just can't seem to get them any deeper. And some of you might say, well, Mark, how do you know that? I'd say a couple of ways. The first way is, you know, sometimes I've actually been in shallower water and just keep letting the line out and trying to see if I can actually touch bottom with that diver. The other way is, and, you know, I think many of you that know me, I started running the Smart Troll system last year. And that's the Smart Troll system where I've actually got a probe on my diver line. And what this probe does, it actually tells me the temperature and the depth of the diver. And I've learned a ton about divers since getting the Smart Troll system. For those of you in the US, you can go to smarttroll.com. For those of you in Canada, actually, I'm the dealer in Canada, Project Salmon. It's a great tool. But I'm going to share today some of the things I've learned by actually having this great little sensor on the line. But first, I want to go through the different divers. So that's the standard diver. From there, you get into the Magnum diver. The Magnum diver, and I've got a couple. Here's a Dipsy diver Magnum. You know, it's got a huge weight on the on the back, and then you've got the mag ring. That's a Magnum diver. I've got another one here. This one is you know, it's another Dipsy diver. This one's been beaten up big time. It's been dragging bottom before, but again, another Magnum diver. And then you've similarly got the same thing, but you've got them in, I gotta find one. You got them in a slide diver. So here's a slide diver Magnum. The weights are all the same weight between a Dipsy and a slide diver. The biggest difference is, again, the concept of the slide diver. So that's a couple of things about the various different divers. I do think now is probably a good time, though, to talk about the slide diver. So with most divers, you actually, with a standard diver, and let's pretend this has got a fishing line. With a standard diver, you got a line coming off your rod, going to the diver, and essentially it's doing something like this, and it's diving down. And then on where my finger is, you've got your bait, or you've got a leader going into a spoon, going to a flasher fly, or going to a meat rig. But typically, you're restrained by the length of your rod. You know, if you have a 20-foot leader, when that diver comes to the tip of your rod, you're now hand bombing in that leader with a crazy psychotic salmon on the end. And we all know what happens there. You either lose the fish, you get your hands all tangled in the fishing line, or you might land the fish, but is that the fun of it when you're actually hand bombing at the end? That's where the slide diver comes into place. Because with a slide diver, it stays on the rod. This is a small one from spring fishing. This is my spring setup as I've been getting it ready. But basically it slides, and you can let out as much line as you'd like. And then you just snap it in. So if I want to have a 20-foot leader or a 30-foot leader, I can. And then when the fish hits, it trips the diver, and the diver actually slides right down to your swivel, and you're done. So that's the benefit of the slide diver. You know, they're not, I'd say they're a little bit more complex to set up. So when you think about a standard diver, you can just you just put them on the end of the line on your snap swivel and you're good to go. With these, if you're running like I do, you know, the Torpedo 7-strand, the slide diver won't slide on the 7-strand. You actually have to tie on a leader, either, you know, a braid leader or a monofilament leader for that slide diver to slide on. So in my particular case, I have a 25 or 30-foot leader of either braid or mono. I started to go with more of a 40-pound mono, and I let the slide diver slide on that. It gives me some stretch, and it allows me to have a more stealth presentation. So that's when I use the slide diver. Alternatively, though, if you're fishing somewhere and you don't get a lot of, you know, the spiny water fleas, you can use braid. I got a 45-pound spool of braid here. You can use braid, and the slide diver will slide on braid, no problem at all. But like I said, most of my diver rods, I got a couple of braid rods I use in the spring, but most of mine right here are the Torpedo 7-strand or the Torpedo 19-strand. I'd show you 19-strand, but I'm out of stock here right now, so I can't. So that's a couple of things I would say about the slide diver. The other thing I'm going to tell you about divers before I start sharing some of the things I've learned about divers in the last little while and how I like to run them is this. When it comes to your diver rods, and here's my main diver rod setup. I'm running a Shimano Dakota 700 upgraded carbon fiber drags on, in this case, a stream side roller rod. I'll tell you, when it comes to divers, if I spend extra bucks on a reel, it's my diver rod. In my opinion, your diver rod should have the best reel on your boat, bar none. Best reel on your boat should be a diver rod with the best drags. You know, would be my advice. The diver rods take a lot of abuse. Those drags get beat up. You run a high quality reel. You know, I'd say if you're if you can grab a Shimano or a Daiwa Saltis, great. If you're in the Akuma brand, I would say go with a cold water, not a convector. You know, if I think about when I started out, I burned up a number of convectors on my diver rods. They were lasting basically a season. So I personally don't recommend that. I'd say you need a, you know, solid reel, good carbon fiber drags, takes a lot of abuse. So that's a little bit about the general divers, and I see some questions coming in, and I'm going to start to answer them in a moment. But a couple of things. You know, if I think about divers, and I've actually got a couple here I'm going to show you. So this is one of my favorite rigs right here, and it's going to answer a few questions as long as I can untangle myself here. There we go. So this is one of my favorite rigs right now, and this is one of my custom divers. So this is a Black IP diver glow, and then I've got a Black IP spoon on the end. And I'm going to unravel this right now quickly, and hopefully, there we go, I don't get tangled up. But basically, I want to show you. So this is, you know, it's about an arm width is my leader. So it's about a 6-foot leader. And this is what I use for my high divers. If you come on my boat and I'm running high divers or a double diver setup, because I love running double divers. For those who don't know, double divers, when you're running 2 per side, I'll have 2 magnums down deep, and I'll have 2 high divers up higher. If I'm running a high diver, it is a diver spoon combo, probably 95% of the time. It's simple. You're not fighting a really long leader. You know, it's basically diver, 6 foot with a spoon. And, you know, I've seen the questions coming a few times about snubbers. Do I run snubbers? Absolutely, I do run snubbers. I know this is a bit controversial, but I find especially with charter customers, not running snubbers means lost fish. Running snubbers, they boat far more fish to the boat. But I'd say that's my number one. If I can get away with a diver spoon, I love a diver spoon combo. It's simple, it's effective, and you're not trying to fight a massive leader. Because if you think about it, if you're running a standard diver, and then you've got a 6, 8, 10-foot leader, and then you've got a meat rig with a 6, 7, 8, 10 foot, maybe not 10 foot, call it 8-foot leader. You've now got 20 foot of gear from your diver to your fish, and that gets really problematic to net that fish, especially if it's, you know, one guy fishing on his own or 2 guys, or in my case, I'm fishing with a lot of people that have never fished before. So that's where If I'm running a high diver, it's typically going to be the spoon. It's typically often going to be a standard diver. When I start to get into the magnums, that's where I get a little bit deeper. But what you've probably noticed is when it comes to diver colors, if I'm running spoons, I like them to match, right? So here you go. You got custom black IP diver to match my black IP Magnum spoon. Here's another one. This is one of my co-host setups here. I've got an old school Walker diver with orange glow UV dot wide mini spoon. Again, another combination. I like to run the combos. If you think about this, I got to give kudos to Captain. He fishes Erie and Lake Ontario, Pete Alex. He talked a lot about diver teams. I'd say we all pick up tips from each other, and I think that's what I picked up from Pete. I like to match them together, especially when I'm running spoons. That's a couple of things. I'd say when I start to get into if I'm running a standard diver, not a slide diver, whether it be a standard or a mag, with a leader, I then have my leaders all wrapped up on pool noodles here. So what these are actually 8-foot, 40-pound monofilament leaders that will go between my diver. It'll then clip on here. You'll have 8 feet, and then I'll start to either hook up like a flasher fly combo here, like this one right here, or I'll hook up a flasher meat combo. The only challenge there is I'm now getting much longer, and it becomes more problematic to boat that fish. So that's where I will often, especially actually let me back up. You'll often hear of guys talk about their diver. Probably the most popular thing you hear about diver is diver flasher fly. Diver flasher fly. Here's my hunch why guys use more flasher flies on divers versus flasher meat. Few reasons. Most of the time when you're running a flasher fly, it's a smaller rotator. It's like this 8-inch fin flasher. It's a spin doctor, usually 8-inch. It's smaller. And then if you're running like 2.5 to 3 times the flasher for your leader length, you're now maybe talking 24 inches max plus the flasher. You're looking at 32 inches. So when you put that behind a 6 or 8 foot leader, it's manageable. And I actually think that's a big reason why a lot of folks, they run flasher flies behind their divers. Because if you're running a flasher meat, you've now got that 8-foot leader from your diver to your flasher. And then if you're like me, I like to run a longer leader. I got another 8 foot on the end. That is a lot of commotion. So I think that's honestly why you see a lot of guys when it comes to divers, they'll start out with either a spoon or they'll start out with a fly. It just feels like it works better and is easier to net the fish. That's why, like I said, I flipped over to slide divers especially for my deeper divers. Often those are the ones I'm running meat on, because at least that way the diver's sliding down and I'm getting rid of that, call it that long leader. Plus I have the ability to have as long a leader as I want with a slide diver. And like I said, in slide divers, they make them in all different sizes. I've got a standard and I got a mini here. So now let's talk about a few things I've learned since I've been running this Smart Troll system. Well, first of all, I almost don't need to have a line counter anymore with this, because this probe is transmitting back to the boat, telling me exactly what depth, and that's super cool. And it has almost made me a bit lazy, where I'm not looking at the line counters anymore. I'm looking at the screen. But a couple of things I learned. And Rick, I totally agree with you. I prefer flasher meat on my deep divers. That's 9 times out of 10, if not 9.5 times out of 10. Deep diver, flasher meat. High diver, flasher spoon. Flasher fly, somewhere in the middle typically for me. But anyways, to answer the question about this, or share what I've learned, often we think about a standard diver, kind of a 3-to-1 ratio. You want to get that diver down to 50 feet, let out 150 feet. And if you think about a mag diver, you want to get that down to 50 feet. It's a 2-to-1 ratio, let out 100. That is general rule of thumb. But what this Smart Troll has showed me is the curve is absolutely not linear. It has a bow in it. Your diver dives much deeper when you first let it out. You let out your first 50 feet of line of a standard diver is probably getting you down 25 feet. That's one of the first things I've learned about this. You know, it starts to plateau or be more gradual the more line you let out. Conceptually, that made sense, but you know, you running a smart troll really showed me that. You know, if you're running a 2-to-1 ratio rule of thumb for a mag or a 3-to-1 for a standard, let me tell you, it is a rule of thumb. It is not accurate, especially in the first 100 feet. It's not accurate, and then especially when you start to get over 250, because it takes a lot more to let out. That's the first thing I learned. The second thing I learned, and this might blow some folks' minds for a second. So we got a standard diver here, right? Standard diver, standard ring, regular weight in the back. You know, there's a lot of folks, and I'm sure there's some watching today, they'll take this and they'll unclip the ring like I'm about to do. As I jam it up here, of course, but they'll unclip the ring. They'll take off the standard ring and they'll go, I got a mag ring here. I still got the standard weight. Let's plug the mag ring. So now I got standard diver, mag ring. And they'll do this because they believe that mag ring is going to get this diver deeper. Let me tell you, it does next to nothing. What this mag ring actually does, it just pushes it away from the boat. It actually doesn't really dive that much deeper. Like, you know, it might dive a foot or so deeper through my testing using the smart troll, but it's not really that much deeper. That blew my mind because I think all of us always believed that, you know, we could take a standard diver, plug on a mag ring, and we could get a whole bunch more depth. It's not the case. What you actually need is you need the mag weight. That is actually what makes it dive deeper. I can tell you what I've been doing on my boat, which again for many of you is going to seem odd, and it would have seemed odd for me 2 years ago before I got the smart troll, is I've actually even got scenarios now where, and I don't have one with, I don't think I have one here, but I will take a diver, I'll put a mag weight in the back, but I will run a standard ring. Because what that's doing is it's actually getting me I'm getting the depth I want. I'm getting the depth I want from the diver, but I don't have the extra drag of that ring. So that is something that I learned that was really interesting and cool for me once I got the smart troll. So now I'll run a lot like this, but I'll put the big mag weight on. So that's the other interesting piece. You know, little tip though. So let's say you do have, like, here's a dipsy diver, mag ring, standard weight. Now you've probably noticed I got a couple of holes here, right? So here's a cheat for you. I tested this last year with a smart troll. It works. The difference in weight between this weight and a mag weight is a little over 3 ounces. What I've done here is I've basically drilled a hole on the right-hand side and the left-hand side. I can now take that weight, put it in the ring, and now basically I've just improvised for the extra weight by adding a 3 ounce weight. I've done a 3 ounce. You can add a 6 ounce. You can add whatever weight you want, and you can now get your divers deeper. So that's something I started. It's a little tip I'm sharing with you guys today, using snap weights to in lieu of an extra mag weight, because many of us, and you know, the diver companies are probably upset with me right now. I make my own, sell my own divers, so I can do this. You know, many people are upset saying, "Why, I can't believe you're sharing this." But you know, many folks in their tackle box have tons of standard divers, and there are only a few mags. This is a great option now if you want to be able to get it down deeper. Drill a hole in the mag ring, throw a weight on, and you are laughing. The only reason I use a mag ring here is because you need the surface area to drill the hole. There's not a lot of surface area in a standard ring. But that's a tip I'll share with you guys. It's worked well. I've actually taken these two, put them on I've got a scale that I use for shipping boxes, put them on the scale, and they're within, you know, call it grams, or, you know, I think it's like less than half an ounce of each other. They're basically weights the same once you put that extra the weight on. You know, and it's interesting for those of you that if you did use the old Torpedo diver like I have here, you know, when Matthew designed that, I'm not sure if you see that, he actually had this little piece here to clip a weight on. there it is, right there to clip a weight on. It's the same concept. I've just made it in the right and the left so that you can snap it on really quickly. But there's a tip I'll share with you guys, and that way you don't have to add all kinds of divers to your arsenal. All you need is a small drill bit, snap weights, and a snap. And it's important because I'll tell you, where I fish in Toronto, almost every season we get probably a 2 to 3 week period of time where the water warms up like soup. And in order to find fish and good temperatures, you've got to fish below 90 to 100 feet. You're running a standard diver, this thing's useless. You can get down to 65, 70 feet. You need to go deeper. And that's where, if you don't have a mag diver, this tip really helps. It allows you to get down deeper. So that's one tip I wanted to share big time with you. It works well. With that, I got a few questions I'm going to answer. So I'm going to start answering some questions right now. I actually got a question from William. Will click on weight work with a slide diver as well? Absolutely. You can take the mag ring for the slide diver, drill a hole in it, clip the weight on. You can't use this is a standard slide diver ring. It's too thin. That's why you've got to use a mag ring, because you need to have something wide enough to drill that hole. I actually haven't really done it with a slide diver too much. I think I've done it once or twice because I got lots of mag weights for slide divers. But the standard divers, I've done it and it's great. But yeah, conceptually, it will work. The only difference between a slide diver and a regular diver is one slides in the line, one does not. Actually, hey, Jim just says he does that exact same thing with deep 6 to make it directional. So yeah, similar thing. By putting it on the side, it makes it directional. So absolutely. Another question I got here: does the diver depth change much between a spoon versus flash or fly? It does. It absolutely does, Jim. Flashers are a bit. A flasher naturally is buoyant. If you throw a flasher at the side of the boat, it's gonna float. It might eventually sink, but it's gonna float more of the time. So that does naturally pull a diver up. The spoon does not. I honestly cannot remember the exact differences, and again, it changes. But yes, there are definite differences. The other interesting piece I learned with the smart troll system here, it blew my mind, is I could be trolling one way, and hypothetically, let's just say I've got 165 feet of line out. I'm at 52 feet. I could be trolling one way, and that's my setting. I turn around, I leave the same amount of line out, but suddenly my diver jumps up 10 feet. That's because of current. So just because you think where your diver's going one day or one way, that does not mean it's always going to be that way. It can do very different things with currents and such. So that's another thing I learned again by using the smart troll. Next, I got a question here. Do you use drag masters, and do you grease the drag washers? I absolutely use drag masters. Love those. All my reels have the drag masters in them. Do I grease them? I do not grease them. What I do is, when I take out the old washers out of my Shimano Dakotas, there's usually grease in there. I leave that grease in. I don't remove that grease, and then I just put the new washers in. That's what's worked for me. I've been doing that way for years with absolutely no problems. So that's what I would share. That's what I'd share with you guys there. I got questions. I think I've answered this, but do I use snubbers? 1000%. I use snubbers. I like using snubbers. Can I land fish without out the snubbers? Yes. Many people say if you set your drag right, you don't need snubbers. But I also like to have, I'm someone who likes to get the fish in the boat. So I like to have the drag maybe a little bit tighter than normal, because I want to get that fish in the boat, because I believe the longer that fish is out there, the more chance it has of getting away. And I think that's where the snubber helps us a great deal. This is a good question from Mitch. Do you prefer a certain color diver? I think I talked about it a little bit. If I am running a spoon, I like to match. I like them to complement 1000%. If I'm running really deep, I will often pull out a glow diver if I'm running really deep. And you might say, but Mark, if you've got a glow paddle, why would you pull out a glow diver? My view is I want as much down there because I want to bring the fish in. I want to track them. So I will use glow down deep. Other than that, if I'm running in that kind of, call it 40 to 60 feet of water, I will often use a black. I will use a clear. So I do have a lot of blacks and clears when I'm running meat and I'm running flash or fly. When I'm kind of in, call it my standard, 20 to 60 feet of water. As I start to get deeper, that's where I will bring out the glows. And if I'm running spoons and it's up higher, as I mentioned, a lot of my high divers are typically spoons. I like to match them. Next, I've got Steve. Have you tried running a diver with OR16 clips? You know what, Steve? I have. I have done it. I know people that do it. It works. It's just not as easy as a slide diver. So, the thing about the slide diver is the moment that fish is hooked and the driver is tripped, you got nothing to worry about. That diver just slides right down the line, right to the flasher, or right to the flasher or the spin doctor or whatever. So for me, running a charter with customers, I don't have to worry about unclipping something like you do with the OR16. Or if I'm fishing solo, for example, again, I don't have to worry about unclipping something, putting that rod down. It's customers on the rod, they're winding it, and they can keep winding until that diver hits the tip, essentially, and I'm netting the fish. So yes, I know guys that do it. I got a very good friend of mine that loves to do it this way. I like to use the slide diver. It works really, really well. Let's see. I got a comment here from Rick about using the Chinook divers. I have a couple of Chinook divers. I haven't really given them much time of day. Nothing against them. They look great. I just I'm so comfortable with, call it the standard diver or the slide diver that I haven't really ventured out into other divers per se. I've got Steven talking about the slide divers. I've talked about the slide diver. And Steven, you've nailed it. It's, when you want to run those longer leads, I think that's where the slide diver really shines. So when I think about in the summer, the bite where I am often slows down around 8 a.m. Sun comes up, it's really bright, not too cloudy. You call it that bluebird sky. That's when I really think the slide diver shines. That's when I'll typically run a clear or black. I'll have a 25, 30-foot lead, flash or fly. 30, 40, 50, 60 feet down is kind of where I'm targeting. So that, again, I'm running the smart troll so I can sense where it is. I've got that out in play, and I feel like it's a more stealth setup that works. So that's really where I use the slide divers a great deal. So that's I think about it. I've been with you guys about 30 minutes now. That's a bit of kind of using divers. The only thing I haven't covered is running double divers. I'd say from when I've been running double divers now probably about 4 or 5 years. For many years, I was scared of double divers. Oh my gosh, that means major tangles. So I'm going to share a couple of tips that I use when I'm running double divers. First of all, when I'm running double divers, my inside divers or my deep divers, those are always mag divers. Always, always, always. I run them as mag divers. Typically, I will run those on a number 1.5 or a number 2 setting. So they're closer to the boat. They're diving down quicker. That's the first tip. Typically, if I'm running wire, those are 7-strand. Those are Torpedo 7-strand like this right here. Then my high divers. My high divers are either a standard diver like the ones I've got here, like my Project Salmon ones, or like a Jensen or a Dipsy diver. They're like those, or they're a standard slide diver like these ones right here, right? They're a standard slide diver. Those I have on a setting of number 3 or number 3.5. So they're planing out and they're higher because they got standard weight. So the other thing I'd say about my high diver is one of two things. I am typically they are not running 7-strand. Typically my high divers, they're either 19-strand. Again, I don't have any here. Otherwise I'd show you the 19-strand. I'm all out. Or I'm running braid on my high divers. And personally, I like to have 2 different wires or 2 different lines. First of all, because I think they have different dive curves. Second of all, if I do, God forbid, get a tangle, it's easier to unravel if they're actually running different lines because you can see the difference. If it's all the same, it's just a bird's nest. Get out the scissors and cut everything. So that's some of the tips I will share about how I run, high divers and double divers, the high and the lows at the same time. The other thing I'm going to say is when you're running double divers, there is no putting the diver in the water and letting that thing out quickly, even with a clicker on. You have to basically put it in the water, slowly loosen the drag, and let that thing creep out ever slowly. You let it out fast, you are guaranteed to tangle. Absolutely guaranteed to tangle. So that'd be the one comment I would say about running double divers. As I'm so that'd be a couple of tips about double divers, but they work great. I'm going to ask the question of the week actually in a second, but I just have a few more questions come in. So Donnie asked me, when running the inline weights, what ratio do you use to determine the depth? That's a tough one, Donnie. So in this particular case here, where I've snapped on a 3 ounce, this is basically a mag diver now. Like it weighs the exact same as this mag diver. So if I use a general rule of thumb of 2 to 1, I'm using 2 to 1 here. But if you start to snap on more, there's no dive curves. So that's where, for me, I'm call it lucky, fortunate, spoiled. I've got the smart troll. That's telling me the depth and the temperatures. So that's kind of what I'm using, because I'm actually looking at the computer screen that this is sending a signal up to my boat. So I think that's the best way I'm going to answer that one. Bit of trial and error, honestly, Donnie, when it comes to adding in the weights. My view here is this is a good tip for when those fish are really deep and your standard diver just can't reach. Snap on the weight. You might not know exactly where it is, but you're probably going to be, if that standard diver can get you down to 70, it's probably going to get you down to that 110, 120, which is where you need to be by snapping on an extra 2 or 3 ounces. Next is, have you ever run a diver off a rigger for those deep salmon? I've not, because I feel like, I've got, I think I got 250 feet of steel on my riggers. So my riggers can get me down 250 feet, so that's more than enough. What I have done, and it's probably not too often, but I have done at certain times of the summer, I've run a small diver. So, something like this small gypsy diver, or like these small slide divers. I've run those off of an of a big board on my outside lines. Rather than using, lead core or weighted steel. You can put divers on those, but I find it to be a small diver. As I'm doing this, I got Ivan saying hello from Florida, and he wants to talk about swordfish. Ivan, I'd love to talk about swordfish. The inside piece here is I was fishing with Ivan in December out of Pompano, Fort Lauderdale area, and Ivan put me on my first swordfish. So pretty cool. Next question is, do you think slide divers dive as deep as regular divers? I know they do. I've tested on the Smart Troll. And if you put a slide diver and you put a regular diver on a scale and weigh them, they weigh the same. They weigh the same. Dimensionally, they're the same. The weight shape's the same. So yeah, they dive the same. I've tested them both. They're within a foot or so of each other. And again, even on the same day, currents differ from one part of the water to the other. So you're never going to get 1,000% accurate test, because you can't run one side of the boat versus the other, because all your reels are spooled differently. But yeah, they dive the same. This is a great question. What rod length do you use while running double divers? When I first started running double divers, I would run an 8.6 on my inside, and I'd run a 10-foot on my outside or high divers when I first started running them. Now, I run 10.5 foot inside and outside. Doesn't matter. My inside diver I've got facing in the water. My outside diver I've got clicked up, or my high diver's clicked up. That's also how I get the separation between the two rods. Really good question, Ryan. Thank you for that. Next, I got, any suggestions for running double divers with a smaller beam? Yeah, I don't think the beam matters a whole ton, right? Like I'm running out of a Tierra with a 10-foot beam. Yeah, it's a bit different. Maybe it's a little bit bigger than a standard aluminum boat, but I've run double divers in an aluminum boat. I know one of my buddies, Vlad. He's got a 16.5 foot Legend. He runs double divers all the time on that boat. So I don't think it's a ton of difference running bigger or smaller beam, frankly, for double divers, because you've got them planning them out. I think as Rick says here, and he's nailed it, you just got to make sure you're not running the same settings. So for me, inside, no, it's typically a 1.5 or 2 setting, mag weight. Outside or high diver typically is a number 2.5 or 3 setting, standard weight. That's how you get your separation. Some really good questions. So now, let's give you my question of the day. See who is listening. So, the question of the day is, when I am running a high diver, what typically bait-wise is on my high diver? What's my go-to bait for a high diver? That's the question of the day. And let's see who's first to answer it. While I'm waiting for someone to answer the question of what bait do I typically put on my high diver, I will answer the question saying, which diver do you set first when it comes to, which diver do you set first when it comes to double diver? Honestly, Dan, it doesn't really matter. I can set the inside or the outside because, again, they're diving differently. I'm letting them out slowly. My general rule of thumb on this one is I will set the high diver out first, and then I'll slowly creep the deep diver out. But don't get me wrong. If I get a fish in the high diver, I'm not going to go pull the deep diver to then set the high diver out first. I'll just set the high diver out and creep it out slowly. So that's really how I do it. So now, when it comes to the first person to answer, he's won before, but not recently, so I think he gets to win. It was John Sipko. He answered that I run a spoon when I'm running my high divers typically. That's my go-to. Running a spoon, 6-foot leader, nice and easy to boat or net that fish. So John, you will have a prize pack coming to you from our friends at Torpedo. But with that, I don't see any other. I don't think there's any other questions coming up. There you go. It's funny. It's funny as I put this. John's owned up now that he learned it from me running the high diver with a spoon, because John has fished with me on my charter boat and actually did have me out fishing on his boat once as well, doing a tutorial day. So, but yeah, spoons absolutely is how I like to run my high diver. And again, it's because I don't want all of that hassle of leaders. So I think Ariane says you're only allowed to win once a month. So I don't know if I'm not sure if John, if you've won in the last month. I'm not sure if you won in February. I will leave that up to the folks at Torpedo. If for some reason John has won already, the second person to answer was Jeremiah. So that's if John did answer, but that's for the folks at Torpedo to figure out. But with that, a big thank you to everyone for tuning in today. Hope you learned a little bit of something on when it came to divers and how I run divers. Really valuable tool. I tell people that are just getting into salmon fishing, don't go rushing out to buy downriggers. Buy some great rod holders, because you can catch a lot of fish just with divers. Don't even need downriggers. So with that, don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to share, and feel free, if you've got some time, check out my site, Project Salmon, as well. But thank you very much, folks. Good luck. If you're going to the Greater Niagara Outdoor and Fishing Show, call it tomorrow or this weekend, I hope to see you there. If you do see me, say hello. Anyways, with that, good luck and have a great season. Talk to you all later. Goodbye.